All right, we're going to talk a little bit about housing fraud. This is Chuck Marone with Strong Towns. And I wrote a column about housing fraud, and it's kind of fascinating to me, the reaction, because I think to people who are, I don't know, adjacent to the financial system, or people who look at housing as more than just zoning and building and we got to get another unit, and look at like the underlying financial aspects of it, are not at all shocked by the idea that the entire housing market is rife with fraud. People who, have this kind of bedrock assumption that housing prices are simply a matter of supply and demand, and the fact that housing prices are high indicates one thing and one thing only, and that is that there's not enough housing. I think those people are a little bit shocked or bemused or bewildered or, not quite certain what to do with the idea that, housing fraud exists. So I'm going to do a couple videos here about housing fraud. And the first one I'm going to do is going to quote from this study put out by the Philadelphia branch of the Federal Reserve. So this is a Philly Fed. Philly Fed put out a report last year, so 2023. And that report was called Owner Occupancy Fraud and Mortgage Performance. Kind of a boring title. It didn't really get much press. Nobody really talked about it. I can't even remember how it came across my desk, but it was an interesting report. It talked about owner occupancy fraud. And let me explain what that is, first of all. Owner occupancy fraud is the idea that you go and apply for a loan for a home, and you suggest on your loan application that you're going to live in that home, when you in fact have no intention of living there. You are buying it as an investor in order to, flip it, sell it off, rent it, do something like that. The reason why this is important, is because the profile of a homeowner and the profile of an investor are very, very different from a risk standpoint. Homeowners live in the home, right? They build up equity. They're trying to create a nest egg. They have a certain profile of how they kind of approach risk. And when you can give a bunch of equity in a home, homeowners tend to not default, right? They even if you run on bad times, even if you lose your job, even if things are difficult, if you've got equity in your house, you're not going to walk away from that. You're not just going to give that up to the bank. You're not just going to default. Homeowners and home ownership is a very low risk, kind of secure bet from an investment standpoint. And this is why we have a 30-year mortgage market. This is why we have Fannie Freddie. This is why we have, a whole system of things based around the supposed stability of the 30-year mortgage. The problem is that investors don't share that profile, right? Investors, if the investment goes bad, they get out. If they buy it to Airbnb it and the Airbnb stops cash flowing and they're going in the negative, maybe they got 2, 3, 4, 5 of these units, they get forced out. They can't make it. Investors, going to flip the property, doesn't work. Okay, now we got to sell it. We just walk away because we don't want to lose the money. The bank is, in a sense, holding, the bag. Here's the thing. When you go in to apply for a loan as an investor, if you say, I'm an investor, I'm buying this house to flip it, I'm buying this house to Airbnb it, I'm buying this house as an investment property, you get a much, much different offer, right? Because you're higher risk. So you have higher interest rates, you have shorter loan terms, you have greater down payments. You have a higher cost of capital because you are higher risk. If you go in and say, I'm buying this house, I'm going to live in it, I'm going to have a family, we're going to be in a home here, you are a very different risk profile. And in fact, because you're a different risk profile, your loan is actually secured and backed up in many cases by the federal government. You get federal support, you get federal subsidy, you get federal backing, you get the benefit you get the benefit of this very large secondary market that the federal government has helped to create. So when investors come into the residential market, it screws up the entire pool, right? It screws up the entire pool of mortgages, the entire pool that's being bundled, securitized, hypothecated, sold off to everybody, mess it up. This is kind of what happened in 2000 to 2008. Subprime mortgages, in a sense, contaminated the pool, right? These were very, very risky bets that were treated like they were normal loans, like they were very secure, solid loans. They messed up the pool and, it caused a huge financial crisis. So occupancy fraud is not subprime. It's a different type of fraud. The Philly Fed puts out this report, and the report says that occupancy fraud in the mortgage market is widespread, right? They said a third of the effective investor population is committing mortgage fraud, right? Is essentially contaminating the pool of all of those tranches of bundled mortgages, right? The Philly Fed said that this is part of the system. It's endemic. They said it's very common in the GSE market, the GSE market being Fannie and Freddie. Fannie and Freddie buy loans from bundlers. They buy loans from local banks. They put them together. This is a way that the federal government has created to allow banks to lend more, to have more liquidity in the system, to keep making loans, to get people into homes. We don't want local banks holding those products. They can't anyway. It's just not a good long-term investment. The federal government takes on that risk, takes on that liability by buying those loans. Well, according to the Philly Fed, Fannie and Freddie have a lot of these loans on the books, these occupancy fraud loans on their books, and they've bought a lot of mortgage-backed securities that are rife with this type of thing. Remember, in 2008, the thing that set off the housing crisis, or 2006, 2007 as it built up, was not the fact that normal people didn't pay their loans. Normal people paid their loans. It was the fact that these derivative objects, these mortgage-backed securities that were made up of portfolios of these loans, and then were split up and cut up and given high ratings based on the assumption that these mortgages were all very good. It found out that a large percentage of them, or a part of them, were not good. And that wiped out, because you have leverage and leverage and leverage upon leverage. You split things up, split things up, split things up. This is financialization. You wind up with people who are, in the vernacular, swimming naked, and they don't know they are. They bought something they thought was AA, AAA, and it's actually junk. What the Philly Fed is saying is that when it comes to occupancy fraud, we've got a very similar risk profile here. And if things start to go in the wrong direction, if this massive housing bubble we have starts to contract or even slow down in any way, which by the way, it is now, things could go bad in a hurry. In my next video, I'm going to talk about another type of fraud in the mortgage market, and then we'll tie it all together.